Thank you for watching First Baptist Church of College Hill online. I hope today's worship experience blessed you and would help you develop a closer relationship with Jesus Christ.
Making the scales to their favor. Okay, cheating you, the corrupt business. So that's what Amos is telling us. And then Isaiah talks about widespread corruption as well. That our hands are full of blood. And stuff. That we're religiously hypocrites. And if you look at Isaiah 1, God kind of lays out stuff. He says, I hate your new moons and your Sabbath. He says, I don't even want you to burn these incense no more. It makes me sick. Now, the new moons, that's monthly. And the Sabbath is weekly. Now, we're not going on Sabbath. That's the seventh day. We actually hold church services on the first day. And we Christians moved that to the first day because of the resurrection, which was on the first day. But even though he's saying, I hate your Sabbath, for us, he's saying, I hate those first Sundays. Or that Sunday, your Sunday worship. In fact, when you think about God, in Isaiah, you got the great I am. He said, I cover my ears and turn my back. So I don't even listen to your praises. And that's how he feel about the hypocritical worship. Okay? And so, I'm telling you that because you can see why he's sending out all of these prophets to tell Israel and Judah that you're not his people. He's going to scatter you. He's going to withhold his compassion from you. So he's telling them all of that 2 centuries before it actually happened. So when Daniel said we weren't listening, that's what Daniel's talking about. We heard the prophets was telling us. We just didn't listen. Okay? And for us, we have to take it from, 8th century to now. Are we listening? Do we have this kind of scales? What are we supporting? Okay? So that's a little bit of the background with different prophets that are going to say the same thing Micah is saying when we get into this Micah. And so we're going to just cover Micah 6. And again, this is God taking the people to court. Okay? And Micah 6 starts out in verse 1. It says, listen to what the Lord says. Stand up, plead my case before the mountains. Let the hills hear what you have to say. Hear, you mountains, the Lord's accusation. Listen, you everlasting foundations of the earth. For the Lord has a case against his people. He is lodging a charge against Israel. Now, God is taking the people to court. And in Israel, there's rules to the court. Okay? So God is the plaintiff. He's bringing the case. And the people are the defendant. Okay? So as a defendant, it's up to the plaintiff to prove the case. Okay? And so, in order for God to prove the case, he's got to bring in facts. Okay? And in Jewish custom, when you have 2 or more witnesses who can corroborate your testimony, that's a fact. Okay? So God is going to bring his case. He's going to talk about the stuff, why he's bringing Israel to court. But he has to bring in witnesses. Okay? And in verse 1 and 2, what we just read, witnesses that God is about to bring in to corroborate his testimony.
Us?
The mountains, the hills, Mount Sinai, right? Mount Sinai got a lot to say. That God gave us. When Moses got the law, he was on Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, when God said, I gave you laws, Mount Sinai is like, yes, he did. The Red Sea would testify too. I saw him coming out of Egypt. He did redeem. So when he said the foundations of the earth, you know, if these walls can talk, right, what would they say? God getting that answer. So God has brought in his witnesses, the foundations of the earth, the mountains, and the hills. And now he's going to present his case. Because we're there. God's there. The witnesses are present. Now God has to present his case. Okay? And then verse 3. My people, what have I done to you? How have I burdened you? Answer me. And some other different verses say testify against me. So God just asked this question, how have I burdened you? Now the rules of the court is God got to prove the case, not the people. So this question isn't really, God is like a, upset lover, like, well, what's wrong with me? That's not what he's asking. He's basically kind of stating that the people think he's a burden. Okay? And he's like, how have I burdened you? You know? And I think that when he say testify to me, he's got the witnesses because he's about to tell us some stuff that's just going to blow out that he's a burden. Okay? So he's just going to present his case. And his case is that it's a covenant. God has told the people, I will be your God. No, if you what? Obey him. You can't be his people unless you obey him. Okay, so that's the agreement. So God has, it's almost like a marital covenant. Okay, there's a husband role and there's a wife role. And God is talking about his position from the husband role. So as a husband, what are some of the things you expect from a husband? What is it? Protection.
Leadership.
Provisions. Okay? Well, he told the women to respect the man. Leadership. Faithfulness. So those are some of the things you expect from a husband. But let's see what God says he did for the people. And so now I'm going into verse 4. And I'm going to do 4 through 6. So I'm doing verses 4 through 6. I brought you up out of Egypt and redeemed you from the land of slavery. I sent Moses to lead you, also Aaron and Miriam. My people, remember what Balak, the king of Moab, plotted, and what Balaam, son of Beor, answered? Remember your journey from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of the Lord. Okay, so God has just went through pretty good history here. Okay, and he's mentioned several things. Okay, he mentioned the Exodus. And when we think about the Exodus, what comes to mind?
Red Sea.
But in the Exodus, in Egypt, the people were what?
In slavery.
Slaves. And he redeemed them. Exodus, when you think about the Exodus, you're thinking about the redeeming works of God. That he was able to take a people who were slaves and make them his people. Okay? So he's saying, I'm a redeemer. Okay? Now, the fact that he redeemed us, it doesn't mean he redeemed us so that we can, keep it 100. Or we can do whatever we want to do. He redeemed us so we were slaves there to them. And now he says we're his servants. And so, which yoke would you prefer? Would you prefer to have the slavery in Egypt or be a servant of God? So his question again, how has he burdened you? You were a slave, and he took you in as his people. Okay? He talks about Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Okay? When you think about those three, this triad, this group, what comes to mind? Like with Moses, what is he known for?
Bringing the children out of Egypt.
Yeah, but he gave them what?
And the commandments.
The law.
The staff. Yeah. The staff is, first of all.
Right. So Moses is a lawgiver. What is Aaron really known for?
Bringing me into the promised land?
No, Aaron made that statue of gold when Moses.
Yeah, he messed up there. But the Levites, the priestly group, is through Aaron, right? So Moses, lawgiver, Aaron, priest, and Miriam, she's a prophetess. And she's also, remember when they crossed over and she led them in worship? So she got double duties. She's a prophetess and she's a worship leader. So when we think about, he just said, I sent you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. I gave you a law. I gave you ministry. And I gave you a prophet and worship leader. So he's talking about how he provided. I heard somebody say your husband provides. He's saying, I provided this leadership for you guys to exist, as a holy people. I gave you everything you needed. Okay? You needed the law. You needed the priesthood, the ministry, and you needed a prophet and a worship leader. So how has he burdened you? He gave you stuff you didn't have before. Okay? I think it's in the New Testament where it says Christ is our wisdom. Because the Hebrews weren't looked at as they weren't righteous people.
Right. Yes.
But that law and the priesthood stuff made them a people. Okay? So God said, I did provide stuff for you. And now he mentions the king of Moab, Balak. And he mentions this prophet. This prophet's name is Balaam. They're in Numbers. I think it's 22 through 24. There was a pretty interesting event that happened. He's like, you remember Balaam? You remember Balak? What happened?
The donkey spoke.
Yeah, that was when the donkey spoke. Yeah.
They wanted to curse the Jews. He wanted Balaam to curse the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And so Balaam, he was going to try to curse the Jews until he ran into that angel.
told Balaam to do what? Don't curse my people.
That's right.
Balaam didn't curse his people. I heard somebody say that a husband protects. So God is saying, I provided for you, I redeemed, I protected you. Right? How has he burdened? How is he a burden to us when he's providing for us and protecting us and redeeming us? Now, there's a little bit more to the story with Balaam, because Balaam did go back to the king and said, I can show you how to have God curse Israel. He said, just send your women into the camp. And they did. He sent the women in there with pouch, go wow, wow. Man's weakness. Okay. And that was just before they're about to go into the promised land. Okay. And even after they did that, even after they ignored God, after God redeemed them, after he provided for them, after he protected them, he still rebelled against them. And then God says in that last piece, he says, remember your journey from Shittim to Gilgal. Now, Shittim is actually where he got with those Moabite women. But that's right on the banks of the Jordan River. Gilgal is on the other side of the Jordan River in the promised land. So even though God has been husband and they rebelled against him, he's saying, remember that journey? Basically, I still took you to the promised land. You rebelled against, the people rebelled against God. He still took them to the promised land. And he's saying, how is he a burden when the people are the one rebelling? So he's established that his first part of his case is he's establishing that he has been a husband. He has been a God. But there's two parts to it. He said, I will be your God if you obey me. Okay. And so, the next few verses, starting at verse 6, is when God starts to kind of talk about the heart. Okay. Now, the people argument is that they are doing the commandments of God. You know, because God has asked for certain things like, you know, the sacrifices and offerings and all of that stuff. He's asked for that. And they're doing it. Okay? Well, you know, they are. But they're like a check-the-box type Christian. Okay? And that's why he calls them hypocrites. Because they're merely trying to check the box. It's not really heartfelt. Okay? And that's why when I quoted Isaiah said, I hate your new moons and your Sabbaths. You know, the incense making me sick. When you come to the altar with these incenses making me sick, please stop. I turn my back. I don't want to hear your praises and your praise team. I don't want to hear that. What do we do on new moons? The first of every month. Communion. See, things like that. Don't do that. If you're going to be hypocritical, if you're not going to really take it serious and live this life that he's got for you, stop. It's making him sick. He's saying, I don't even listen to you no more. I don't even hear your prayers. my hands over my ears, turn my back. That's how serious he is. Okay? And so that was in Isaiah. Amos said, learn to do right. Okay? And so now, in Micah, God proves that that he's been faithful to the covenant. Like he says, he took them from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know his righteous acts of the Lord. Okay? Because he was showing them how faithful he is to his covenant, how righteous he is. And the people should learn from that. But they don't. They didn't. Okay? And so now he goes into verse 6. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Should I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? So he did ask for a calf. Okay? And those calves, they were supposed to be a year old because it was the thought behind it is that you're giving your best. It's unblemished. You know, he didn't want an old one that you couldn't sell. Now, what they did is they took these calves to the temple and they sacrificed them, and then the food went to the poor. Okay? Because it's in, I think it's in Psalms 50:12, I believe. And God said, if I was hungry, I can tell you. You know, and in Isaiah, let me get it right. And in Isaiah 1, I'm going to read verses 10 through 15. He says, hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. He's calling Jerusalem Sodom. Okay? Listen to the instructions of our God, you people of Gomorrah. The multitude of your sacrifices, what are they to me, says the Lord? I have more than enough of burnt offerings, of rams and the fat of fattened animals. I have no pleasure in the blood of bulls and lambs and goats. When you come to appear before me, who has asked this of you? This trampling of my courts. Stop bringing meaningless offerings. Your incense is detestable to me. New moons, Sabbaths, and convocations, I can't bear your worthless assemblies. Your new moon feasts and your appointed festivals, I hate with all my being. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands in prayer, I hide my eyes from you. Even when you offer many prayers, I am not listening. Your hands are full of blood. That's Isaiah chapter 1, verses 10 through 15. My translation, God said, don't act like you're trying to help me pay my Tico bill. And those things that he's asking us to do, it really does have a purpose to help the needy. But the people started taking it like, oh man, I got to do this again. And it became that type of attitude. Somebody ever do something nice for you, but it was just the delivery was off? You remember how you felt with that? Like, you could have killed this little gift. You had to bring it. You know what it was? You get an attitude.
They gave you a gift.
Right. You know, it's the delivery. It's the heart. Yeah, that matters. So, in verse 6, the people are, in their hearts, they really don't want to give the sacrifices. You know, they can use that. Those calves, they can go sell it and have a good day. You know, so there's a little attitude with it. verse 7. Will the Lord be pleased with 1,000 rams, with 10,000s of rivers of olive? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? And we just heard what he said in Isaiah, like, what do I need with that? And it's a little hyperbole in there, right? He never asked for 1,000 rivers of oil. But they're kind of irritated about these commandments to give something, and now they're kind of embellishing everything. You're asking the world to me. How much I gotta give you, Lord? Will you ever be satisfied, Lord? You know? And so you can see why he's responding the way he's responding. Because he showed that he is faithful to the covenant. And we're just, we got better things to do. Any questions? Going fast? Any observations? And there's the firstborn. You know, they're asking about the firstborn. She's like, give me my firstborn. But he did ask for the firstborn. Okay? And if we recall back in Egypt, they had to put the blood of the lamb on the door, and their firstborn was saved. But every other body in Egypt who didn't put the blood on the door, they could lose their firstborn. So, but the firstborn, it was, the firstborn was to be given to God as they were to be the minister, basically. So they were to be the ones working at the temple. Okay, so the firstborn son was to be a minister. Now later he came and gave that to the Levites. But he wasn't asking for the firstborn in terms of like he wanted to slaughter the firstborn. Again, they didn't understand, well, they knew what he was asking, but they were just irritated about it. Sometimes you just don't want to do something. You know? And so they started, it became a big deal. So he did ask for the firstborn not to be crucified. Now, the pagans, they were actually doing child sacrifices. You know, it was, you know, where they was actually burning kids and stuff. That's not what he's asking.
It was more or less what Hannah did when Samuel was born. She told him, no razor go on his head, and I give him back to you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So he was a minister.
Right.
And so the thing was, every household firstborn would be a minister to offer that. Again, he wanted that ministerial leadership. But again, people kind of took it. You know, it became burdensome for people. And then he goes in verse 8. He's talked about the heart of the people. Okay. And he's already, so he's proven that the people's heart wasn't into it, that they wasn't faithful to his commandments, and that he was faithful. And now he goes into telling them exactly what he wants. And it says in verse 8, He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. I like this verse because the part of the verse that I really like is that God says, I've already shown you what I want. Okay? So he's not simply telling us stuff. He actually shows us how to do it, of what he's talking about. He's shown us love, compassion, all of that, humbleness. Everything he's asking for, he has literally shown us. Okay? So he's saying, I've already shown it to you. And there's three key things: justice, mercy, and humbly walk with him. Now, he tells people to do justice, or to be, live just. All over we heard what Amos and Isaiah and Hosea was talking about. People was just cheating people. And one of them said, you're skilled with both hands at stealing. And so he said, be just. And mercy is the only one out of the three. He said, mercy is the only one he said love. He didn't say you have to love walking with him. But he said he does want you to love mercy. Okay, what does that say about God that he wants? Like he said, be just. Walk humbly with him. But he says, you don't have to be merciful. He said you have to love mercy. What does that tell you about his nature?
He's a merciful God.
He's a merciful God. And sometimes we're not so merciful.
True. So true.
Sometimes we choose when we want to be merciful.
Yeah.
It's like, I like girls a lot, but I love this girl.
Right.
There's a difference between me liking a girl but loving this girl. Sometimes our definition of mercy is the same. If it suits our situation or whatever the deal is, then yeah, I'm merciful. If not, I catch the next one.
I'm glad you cleared that up. This one. I'm just going to be in trouble for a minute. That's why we got to listen to it all. And then he says, walk humbly with them. And this is something that, when I say this here, everybody had that. I saw 2 footsteps, and then 1 footsteps, and you was carrying me and stuff. That saying that God was carrying you in time of trouble. God is not your boo. He did not walk you on the beach. He walked you through the wilderness. You had to walk. And he said, stop complaining. He walked the complaint out of them. And a lot of people, they like to say that, like God walking with them. But he knows the path. He's not following you around. When he led them through the wilderness, when the smoke went this way, you better go that way. With Jesus, when Jesus went through and he was calling the disciples, and he went and said, hey, I can teach you to be a fisherman. Then he started walking off. You can go and follow him. But he wasn't chasing, he didn't chase nobody. Even when the rich young ruler came to him, well, how can I get heaven? And Jesus told him that the rich young ruler walked off. Did we hear about him again? Jesus didn't go and say, hey, come here, let me talk to you. Let me holler at you. So he walked off his path, and Jesus went his path. So if we want to walk with him, he said, you got to walk humbly with God.
Well, the rich ruler was following his money.
Well, they're not following God.
Yeah.
Because God is walking his own.
Right.
God is walking wherever he's walking. It's up to us to follow. It's like when I was a kid, we went in that store, and they said, look, you better stick. She went there, I went that way.
Nowadays, it's a whole different thing. Now you get participation awards. humility,
Yeah.
but it also, even from a winning perspective, you knew that in order to get whatever status you want, you had to work for it. Not if you just go out there, they're going to get an award. So I stand out there in the outfield and, scratch my head and blow up. That's true. And I'm going to get the same award that the guy that hit the home run that won the game.
Any additional comments? So God has presented his case. He's proven that he's been faithful. He's proven that we haven't been faithful. He told us exactly what he was looking for. And now the rest of this is the prophecy of what's about to happen. Okay, and keep in mind that this is 2 centuries before Daniel, or before the exile. And this is fulfilled by that exile. What comes in verses 9 through the remainder, which is 16. And he says, listen, the Lord is calling to the city, and to fear your name is wisdom. He, the rod, and the one who appointed him. And so he's calling out, he's been calling out to the city. He sent several, he sent, from Jonah to Daniel, like over 10 prophets over that time span. And stuff. Now this word, to fear your name is wisdom. And that word fear, it has a couple of meanings to it. And you can find different debates about which one is being applied here and stuff. And one is fear, like we think about fear, you're scared of it and stuff. But there also, the fear, that word can also be like a reverence. Okay, and stuff. And because he's using that husband-wife role and stuff, and he told the husbands to love the wives, but he told the wives to respect the husbands. So there has to be this respect here. So I lean toward that fear of reverence. We're to be respectful of him. They're revering him. And so, what's your thoughts? Any thoughts on that word?
What word?
Fear. Is it reverence or is it fear? Or is it like fear?
No, because like with God, with me, you put the fear of the Lord, but his fear is, like I said, respect. You get respect, it's not to me. Not going, you can go further than you would if you respect someone. You'll do more for the cause.
Okay, so you lean more toward a respectful approach to it.
Yes, and because a lot of people say when they supposed to respect, fear him, they think, oh Lord, no, it ain't like that. It's like your father. If you love your father, he's right. He's gonna do right. You're gonna try to be like him.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
yes.
so I know that in Proverbs, the words say, the beginning of wisdom is to fear the Lord.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that he's saying here that and up there it was saying fear is your name.
Mm-hmm.
So it say the Lord, that this verse I'm reading in the same book you got, like the same verse. Listen, the Lord is calling to the city, and to fear your name is wisdom. So he's telling them the same thing that was said in Proverbs, that to fear the Lord is to be wise.
Yes.
To have wisdom, that's the beginning of wisdom.
Okay.
And that's where we should be at.
So is the fear like respectful, a reverence, or is it more like you're frightened?
No,
Well,
not
as-
frightened.
It's
Not
reverence.
frightened at all.
Okay.
Christ got the Father, you're gonna go to him. How you gonna go to him?
Okay.
You can't get over him, you can't get around him.
Right. Be fearful.
You got this.
And then we go into
That's why
verse.
you humble yourself.
And then we go into verse 10. It says, "Am I still to forget your?" Oh, wait a minute. Let me back up, because we were talking about that fear. He did say, "Heed the rod, and the one who appointed it." And remember, there's a rod and a staff. You know, so some is used for correction. Yeah. And am I still to forget your ill-gotten treasures, your wicked house, and the short ephah, which is a curse? So he's like, I'm not forgetting what you did. You know. So, you remember one time I got in trouble, and you know, I thought I was about to get a spanking, and my dad said, "I'll see you later on." So I had that whole day,
Right.
because I knew he was going to remember. Shall I acquit someone with dishonest scales, with a bag of false weights? So now he's coming back to, it sounds like a lot of what Isaiah and Amos was talking about, this corruption. And God said, "Am I supposed to forget this stuff?" You know? And again, this is 2 centuries before before Israel and Judah went into exile. They had a lot of time to correct their behavior. And they chose to not. You rich people are violent. Your inhabitants are liars, and their tongues speak deceitful. How is it violent being rich? Yeah. You remember when Elon Musk took that chainsaw and on stage, he was doing like that?
Yes, sir.
Right? He was boasting that he went in and cut jobs. Right?
Right. Yeah.
But when he went and cut jobs like a chainsaw, there was consequences for some people. Some people lost jobs behind that.
Yes.
You know, their houses, they got to pay mortgages, car notes. They got children. So that attitude that, you know, the richest man in the world is wanting to be richer. And to be richer, he saw no problem putting you in poverty.
Yeah. So no problem.
I think that the arrogant, rich people, they look down on the poor, and if they can oppress them like the children of Israel were being oppressed in Egypt, they would do it.
And that's where he's saying the rich are violent.
Yes.
You know, because he got the system gained
For them.
for them, and the poor have no
No way.
opportunities for success. Okay, and then whatever little you start making,
They want some of it.
they come and take some of that.
Exactly.
And so God is seeing that type of behavior, and he's calling it violence. Okay? And then in verse 13, "Therefore I have begun to destroy you, to ruin you because of your sins." In verse 14, "You will eat but not be satisfied. Your stomach will still be empty. You will store up but save nothing, because what you save I will give to the sword." And that's what happened when Babylon and Assyria came in and took everything that Israel had built. So Israel and Judah they had life. They had their houses. They had their farm, the wine, the grapes, all of that stuff. And they were pretty prosperous. And then Babylon took it. And they took it by that sword. So this was fulfilled. You know. I know this country is got more weapons than anybody. And sometimes we think we're
The best.
indefeatable. And there is scripture that says God likes to humble those who exalt themselves. So, but if we have similar behavior, don't be surprised if you get similar results. Verse 15. You would plant but not harvest. You would press olives but not use the oil. You would crush grapes but not drink the wine. You have observed the statutes of Omri and all the practice of Ahab's house. You have followed their traditions. Therefore I will give you over to ruin and your people to derision. You will be the scorn of the nations. Omri and Ahab, they were two ungodly leaders, kings or rulers. And the people started following their statutes, their law. You know, probably because it was beneficial to them. If it benefits you, you're okay with unjust laws if it benefits you. We kind of see that today. You know, we know some laws are unjust, but if it benefits some people, you'll be like, it's okay. It'll be all right. You know. But we see how God reacts to that. You can't, you gotta walk humbly with God. You can't pick and choose which way you're going. You know, like I walk with you today and Wednesday. You know, like, God, you gave us 10 commandments. I got 3 out of 10. You know, you don't pick and choose. And that's Micah 6. And I did the last page. I just put. I saw this in Psalms, and I just wanted to read it to you. But first, before we move to Psalms, any questions on Micah? Anything in Micah? Any comments you have? Yes.
I would like to say that the same scenario that happened in those days are happening today. You're going through the same thing. You know, the madness and God, they don't not go way out. They never get over. They go through the test of time. And all the stuff around the wars and all the stuff we're getting into, it's the same thing. It's just a piece of time. But God's word remains the same. No matter what age we live in.
Any additional comments? But I would like to just do Psalms 15. It says, Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? The one who walketh blameless. Who does what is righteous? Who speaks the truth from their heart? Whose tongue utters no slander? Who does no wrong to a neighbor? Who casts no slurs on others? Who despises a vile person, but honors those who fear the Lord? Who keeps an oath even when it hurts, and does not change their mind? Who lends money to the poor without interest? Who does not accept a bribe against the innocent? Whoever does these things would never be shaken. I want to plug in Sunday school. They have a series they're studying now called Fulfilling Your Obligations to Your Neighbors. Okay? And a lot of what they're studying now is balancing the law in the Old Testament as we transition to the New Testament and it becoming the transformation of the heart. You know, like, you know, the law will give you certain things. You know, then James said, well, faith without works is dead. So it's an act that confirms your faith. Okay, and we talked about, whenever tragedies happen, we're thoughts and prayers. But we not simply thoughts and prayers. We are people who are called to action. James was talking about a guy hungry. He didn't want thoughts and prayers. He wanted a sandwich and stuff. So we are all called to confirm that faith. We're called into action. Okay? And you see that even in Micah 6. God calling them into action. That's all I have for you tonight. Pastor, did you want to